Tonight, the final push before the first nominating contest of the 2024 presidential election.
We're going to go all the way until the last hour because we know what situation we're in.
Details of what to expect in tonight's Iowa caucuses. Plus, the world marks 100 days in the war between Israel and Hamas. And
we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Remembering Dr. King's revolutionary dream.
You constantly put one foot in the Constitution and the other foot in the Scripture.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The 2024 race for the White House kicks into full gear as the nation's eyes turn to cold Iowa. Good evening, everyone. From CBN studio headquarters in Virginia Beach, I'm Wendy Griffith, in for John and Jenna. Iowans convene tonight to cast the first votes in the run-up to the 2024 presidential election. The nation will also get the chance to see if strong polling for former President Donald Trump matches up with what the voters decide. CBN's Matt Galka was recently on the ground in Iowa ahead of the caucuses and joins us now with a preview of the big night in the Hawkeye State. Matt?
Well, Wendy, there's no doubt about it. Iowans take the caucus responsibility very seriously. And while candidates made their last-minute pushes over the weekend and even today, they also tried to manage some expectations because the one thing nobody in the race can control is just how much the weather might impact the results tonight.
I need each and every one of you to get out, everybody get out, just get out and vote.
The former president over the weekend in Iowa asking his supporters to not sit caucus night out, downplaying the frigid temperatures and potential impacts the weather could have on turnout.
So dress warmly tomorrow night. And by the way, it's all inside. Everything's inside.
The final major poll before the caucus has Trump enjoying a near 30-point lead over the competition. The former president is polling at 48% among Iowa voters, with former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in a tight race for second.
We're going to go all the way until the last hour because we know what situation we're in.
Haley continued to tell supporters over the weekend a vote for Trump was a vote for more chaos. She told us on the trail she thinks Iowa momentum can carry her through in other states.
What does success look like in Iowa to you?
Coming out strong. We want to be strong in Iowa. We want to be strong in New Hampshire. We want to be strong in South Carolina. And we don't know what strong looks like until we see what the election day looks like.
I think there's over 1,700 precincts. We're going to have people there delivering the message. And you're going to see us convert people and bring it home.
DeSantis is optimistic he'll have a big finish in Iowa. He also sharpened his attacks against rivals Haley and Trump over the weekend.
Well, I think what I've seen is, obviously he's got a share. He views it, whoever kisses the ring is good. You could be the lousiest Republican in America, but if you kiss the ring, he likes you. You could be the best Republican in America. If you don't kiss that ring, then he'll trash you.
Now, Wendy, Trump even went after one of his biggest supporters over the weekend, businessman Vivek Ramaswamy, who is polling in fourth. Trump told potential voters Ramaswamy is, quote, not MAGA and not to get duped, trying to shore up as many votes as possible tonight. And Wendy, back to that weather, they're forecasting record-breaking cold temps for caucus voters, sub-zero with possibly negative 20-degree wind chill. That's cold.
Well, that's so cold. Matt, when you were there just recently, did you get the sense that voters had their minds made up already?
Well, I think at the Trump events, the answer was an obvious yes. And at some of the other events, you still had a number of undecided voters who were taking everything into account. But here's one of the most interesting things about Iowa. In years past, actually, as recently as 2016, 45% of caucus voters said they made up their mind on who to vote for in the week leading up to the vote. So maybe we'll see some surprising results tonight.
Wow,
Wendy?
That does surprise me. Very interesting fact. Thank you so much, Matt. Well, let's bring in CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody. David, great to see you. Explain why white evangelicals in Iowa are really the ones propelling former President Trump's lead.
Well, Wendy, it's because it's a different evangelical electorate than we're used to. You know, we're used to the Mike Huckabee, the Rick Santorum, the Ted Cruz, culture warrior evangelical candidate doing well in Iowa. It's not like that anymore. It's more of a populist evangelical movement. Yes, the culture war issues are very important, but you fuse that with the populist anti-government attitude that many evangelicals see right now, and you have a Donald Trump, in essence, a really positive sense that Donald Trump's going to do well among evangelicals because he's able to fuse both the culture warrior issues that he has been very strong on when he was president and also the populist views that he holds to this very day.
So if Haley and DeSantis are trying to take home second place, what happens to the candidate who comes in third?
Well, I think this is where you cue the sound effect where I go, womp, womp. That's the end of that. Yeah, I think the person that's coming in third, look, they can talk and spin it all they want. But if Ron DeSantis comes in third, not so much Nikki Haley, but if Ron DeSantis comes in third, you have to seriously question whether or not he can survive another day in this race. Not only will the money dry up, but look, he put everything into Iowa. He's been relatively non-existent in New Hampshire and South Carolina. Yeah, he's done some stuff, but it's been Iowa or bust. He has he says he has the best ground game in Iowa. So if you put all that together and you come in third, I think there'll be some serious rethinking on Tuesday morning with Ron DeSantis. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, and how much, David, does Iowa really matter? I mean, Ted Cruz won back in 2016, and that didn't pan out. Is the state still as important to the election cycle?
Well, it's important in one area, and that is enthusiasm. And what I mean by that specifically, let's take Nikki Haley, for example. Okay, let's say Trump wins tonight. Everybody's expecting Trump to win. But what if he wins by 10 points, 12 points, somewhere in that 10-point range? Well, right now, Nikki Haley is down by almost 30 points in the polls. So I can guarantee you the spin by Haley's campaign, and let's be honest, by the legacy media, will be, wow, Nikki Haley defied expectations. She was down 30 in the polls, and she only lost by 10. Well, losing by 10 is a lot, but it's all about expectations and about enthusiasm. And so this idea that Nikki Haley would come out of Iowa, let's say a strong number 2, will propel her in a much better way into New Hampshire. And oh, by the way, she's doing much better in New Hampshire than she is in Iowa. So it could help her as well. So it's all about the numbers game. Who knows? You know, this is so surreal. I must tell you, tonight we could literally have kind of what sounds like a victory speech from Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis when they come in second and lose by 20 points, but it'll sound like a victory speech. Let's be clear. Donald Trump is expected to be the clear victor tonight.
And what do you think, David?
Oh, well, Wendy, wait, are we rolling? Is there a camera anywhere? As I look into my crystal ball, I think you're going to look at Donald Trump anywhere from 15 to 20 points ahead. I think it's 20-point win, at least by Donald Trump. And if it's less than 20, then I think there'll be some questions as to, you know, can Nikki Haley pull off the upset in New Hampshire?
David Brody, that's what we wanted to hear. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
You bet.
God bless. Well, as we've been telling you, folks in Iowa aren't the only ones facing Arctic cold temperatures. More than 90 million Americans are under winter weather advisories tonight. The National Weather Service warning of frigid wind chills across much of the country. In parts of Montana and the Dakotas, forecast to feel as cold as -50. What does that even feel like? The National Weather Service warning people to stay warm, stay indoors, reminding you that frostbite is possible within 20 minutes or less of outdoor exposure. Well, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin home from the hospital following complications from prostate cancer surgery. The Pentagon says Austin will work from home as his recovery continues. Doctors say he's progressing well from the complications, noting also that the cancer was caught and treated early. And Secretary Austin's outlook is, quote, excellent. Good to hear. Well, as the clock ticks down to the deadline for a partial government shutdown, a short-term bipartisan measure to keep the government open past the end of this week is in the works. The stopgap bill unveiled Sunday by Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer still needs to pass the House and Senate and would extend government funding at current levels for some federal agencies until March 1st, for others through March 8th.
A shutdown is the wrong thing to do. A majority of Democrats and Republicans don't want a shutdown. But there's a group, a hard-right group, particularly in the House, some in the Senate, who want to bully their way into forcing a shutdown. That cannot happen.
The Israel-Hamas war hits 100 days. The latest from the Middle East, just 2 minutes away. Stay with us. Welcome back. Already high tensions in the Middle East intensifying today after Iran-backed Houthis fired a missile striking a U.S.-owned ship off the coast of Yemen. The attack less than a day after Houthi rebels fired a missile towards a U.S. warship in the Red Sea, and a day after a grim milestone in the Israel-Hamas War. 100 days of fighting. In Tel Aviv, hundreds of people holding yellow balloons stood in silence for 100 seconds Sunday to remember the more than 100 or so hostages still held captive by the Hamas terror group in Gaza. The youngest of some 30 child hostages held by Hamas is set to turn 1 year old on Thursday. A relative of the baby pleading for his release.
Is it possible to make something to free them from the Hamas, to bring him and his family back to Israel to celebrate the birthday with his family? Is it possible?
The renewed plea for hostages comes on the same day as a ramming and stabbing attack near Tel Aviv, and as the Israeli military today released new video shooting troops operating in Gaza. As the humanitarian crisis there worsens, the United Nations is issuing an urgent warning that Gaza needs more aid to arrive faster, or Palestinians will suffer from widespread famine and disease. Our senior international correspondent, George Thomas, has been covering the war since the beginning. George, you were on the ground in Israel the days right after that horrible attack in October. What have your experiences over these last 100 days stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very surprising that Israel hasn't managed to totally dismantle and destroy Hamas. The mastermind, Yahya Sinwar, they knew where he was initially in the opening days of the war, allegedly in a bunker. He still has not been eliminated. The vast infrastructure, the underground network of tunnels continue to exist. Hamas continues to fire off its rockets multiple times during the week. It's incredible. I think it also shows the challenges that Israel is facing in trying to go after one of Iran's most strategic backed groups in the region. You've got the Houthis down to the south on the Yemen coast. You've got Iran. You've got Iran's proxies in Iraq that are launching lobbying attacks against our U.S. forces. I think 3 months in, 100 days plus in, Hamas is still very much alive. The numbers are there are between 5,000 to 10,000 of its fighters still alive. I think Israel has got some real challenges in the days and weeks ahead, and 100+ hostages still unaccounted for.
Do you see an end in sight, George?
No, this is tough. This is a bloody slog. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on Bibi Netanyahu to scale down on the intensity of the fighting. But this is, again, if you go by what Netanyahu said at the onset of the war, he said his mission would be the total destruction of Hamas. That hasn't happened yet. So that's a big challenge.
And so far, the U.S. has remained aligned with Israel, but some are saying that there's been some tension, that Biden is getting increasingly frustrated with Netanyahu. Do you see this unity lasting, or would there be a breakdown?
I mean, no, the unity will always, Israel will continue to be our strongest ally in the region. We will continue to be their strongest ally in the region. It's interesting today marking the 100th day of this war, President Biden released a statement, in essence, did not even mention the 22,000 plus Gazans who have lost their lives, the immense destruction of the Gaza Strip, didn't even mention the word Palestinian in the White House release. But at the same time, you see this frustration with the administration, with Netanyahu, because the administration is asking Israel to consider a renewed version of the Palestinian Authority that would potentially take over in the day after the war. And obviously, Israel is not pleased with this idea because they see what's happened in the West Bank. In fact, I had a chance to pose that question to former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, as well as the former Australian Prime Minister, when I met them in the first few days of the war. And they were very reticent of this idea that the Palestinian Authority would take control again of the Gaza Strip. So I think these are these bones of contention between the White House and Netanyahu. And then obviously, Hamas is clearly winning the public relations war battle in the hearts and minds of people all around the world. And obviously Israel says, we don't care about this PR war, and it continues to wage its operations. But it's weighing on the Biden administration for sure.
And especially for those hostages.
Yeah, very tough.
Got to keep praying for them.
Exactly.
God, thank you so much, George.
You're most welcome.
We will, the work to make one man's dream move closer to reality when we come back. What's being done to achieve the vision of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Today, the nation marks the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. King's life was defined by the fight for civil rights, a fight forever embodied in his historic I Have a Dream speech. CBN's Brody Carter reports on how the enduring words of that speech are still carrying forward the fight for justice and equality for America.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
August 1963, the official March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom also marked the 100th year since President Lincoln had issued the Emancipation Proclamation.
But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free.
Taylor Branch, author of the Pulitzer Prize-winning trilogy about Dr. King, recalls the civil rights leader walking a fine line in order to pressure the Kennedy administration and Congress to initiate a strong federal civil rights bill.
The reason his rhetoric was so balanced was that he constantly put one foot in the Constitution and the other foot in the scriptures.
Branch tells CBN News authorities feared the March on Washington would become a bloody riot. The government shut down businesses and warned people to stay home. Instead, the world witnessed a peaceful protest, along with an iconic speech that often sounded more like a sermon.
And he could tell that it wasn't going over. And a black preacher is sensitive to the audience, and black preachers are more or less like jazz musicians. They have riffs.
One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
Other historians like Dr. Jamar Tisby point to those who King learned from and leaned on.
That wasn't the first time King used that phrase, I have a dream. In fact, he is said to have borrowed it from a black woman preacher named Prathia Hall. And he heard her use it in a prayer a year or two prior, and it stuck with him.
Famously, it is said, and I could not document it, but a number of people say it, that Mahalia Jackson was standing behind him and said, "Tell him about the dream, Martin."
Tisby says the march became critical in building up willpower in Congress to pass the 1964 Civil Rights Act and 1965 Voting Rights Act. Some believe echoes of Dr. King's charge remain the same today as we face what Dr. King called this generation's fierce urgency of now.
If you look at jobs and unemployment, black people are still getting the short end of the stick.
In 2021, black Americans made nearly 50% less income per capita than whites, with similar disparities at the household level, meaning the poverty rate for black families is twice that of white families.
Meanwhile, the poor are getting poorer, and basic necessities from healthcare to housing is becoming much, much harder for people.
Dr. Tisby highlights the recent Supreme Court reversal of affirmative action, which he believes closed the door to future successes of black Americans, further exacerbating a white-collar culture, housing inequality, and the increasing wealth gap.
Behind you, it says, "Justice takes sides." Can you elaborate on that?
Eli Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor, said, neutrality only helps the oppressor, never the oppressed. And what he's getting at in that phrase is the idea that we can't stand on the sidelines when issues of justice are at stake.
At the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C., a traditionally conservative think tank, they're working to discover best practices and policies that build a brighter future for everyone.
One thing that you learn about America, if you study it at any length, is that we've always been divided. We're a people of different backgrounds and perspectives, and we're a democracy, and we're cantankerous, and we fight with each other. But we're at our best when we work those things out and move forward positively.
The way in which we, as a nation, are successful is that we recognize the power of equality of opportunity, individual dignity, our common humanity.
Author and senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, Ian Rowe, believes one solution is focusing on tools for success instead of barriers.
Those are the things that bind us together. The importance of families, faith, education. Doesn't matter if you're black, white, Asian, doesn't matter. Those are the fundamental elements of human flourishing that we have to coalesce around.
We should look at coalitions. What are like-minded groups and individuals out there, and how can we link arms and protest together, whether that's through legislation or marches or fundraising or whatever it might be? How can we gather groups of people to partner in solidarity on justice issues?
Just a short walk from where King gave his famous speech, the Stone of Hope, and carved in it is Dr. King.
We've been here for just over 2 weeks, and one of the things that we want to see is the Martin Luther King.
We spoke with a variety of visitors from California, the UK, and Germany.
It starts with us.
And there's consensus that while America and the world has come a long way thanks to Dr. King, more needs to be done to honor his legacy, fulfill his dream, and fight for justice. As a way of addressing discouragement that often happens when doing this work, Dr. Tisby believes that God is just as interested in who we become as he is in what we accomplish. That's because in growing internally, in pursuing justice, we become more like Christ. Reporting in Washington, D.C., I'm Brody Carter, CBN News.
Finally tonight, learning what it means to be a Girl Scout. That's the mission of Troop 6000, the one-of-a-kind troop launched in 2017, designed to serve families in New York City's shelter system. The program recently expanded to include girls staying at the Row Hotel, which provides shelter to migrant families. One of the things they're learning, as Dr. Ted Long of NYC Health Hospital says, is that they're not alone.
As they deal with the trauma they've experienced, as they deal with their own mental health issues, they're not alone. They're with 58 million other people supporting them and pushing them forward.
Along with millions of girls around the world, this troop will also be selling the all-important Girl Scout cookies this spring. Love those cookies. Well, that's going to do it for today's Faith Nation. We will see you back here tomorrow. God bless you.